Okay, so picture this. You're settled in, morning coffee's steaming, ready to hit the inbox, and boom, nothing.
Total email blackout.
Exactly. And that's what hit tons of Microsoft 365 users back on November 25th, 2024.
Outlook, Teams, Exchange Online,
Mm.
the whole shebang basically went kaput.
Yeah, it was rough. And we've dug deep into this one, news articles, tech forums, the whole 9 yards to break down exactly what went wrong.
You know, the thing that really jumps out about this outage is how widespread it was. I mean, Microsoft 365 is practically running the show for so many businesses and people globally, right?
Yeah, totally.
So when a service that big goes down, well, the fallout is massive.
Absolutely. So let's rewind back to the start, get that timeline straight. Our sources show those first signs of trouble popping up on Down Detector around 7:34 a.m. GMT.
Oh, yeah, and naturally, everybody's immediately flooding social media, venting their frustration.
That's like the internet's collective groans, right?
Great.
But in those early hours, what were people actually reporting problem-wise?
Pretty much the same stuff across the board. Couldn't get into their inboxes, Teams calls were a no-go, even basic things were loading super slow.
Ah, the worst.
And for a lot of folks, this hit right when they were starting their workday.
Oh man, talk about a wrench in the gears.
Total productivity killer really highlights how much we lean on this stuff for even the simplest things these days.
Right? And speaking of those slow loading times, one quote from Reddit really stuck with me. Someone just posted, Outlook.office.com took too long to respond.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Simple, but it captures that feeling perfectly, right?
Mhm.
But from the looks of it, Microsoft's initial response wasn't quite lining up with what users were actually dealing with.
Yeah, that's right. So around 8 a.m. GMT, they finally acknowledged there's an issue over on X, the Twitter rebrand,
Right.
but their official status page, still claiming everything's fine and dandy.
Classic.
And that disconnect between what users were seeing and what Microsoft was saying, well, it just fueled the confusion and frustration even more.
It's almost like being told everything's fine while your house is burning down, you know?
Totally.
But behind the scenes, what were they actually doing to get a handle on this thing?
Well, their X updates give us a little peek into their process. Seems like they pinpointed a recent change as the likely cause and started working on rolling it back.
Okay, so damage control.
Exactly. And that involved manually restarting a bunch of machines, deploying a fix, and constantly monitoring the whole situation. But remember, we're talking a massive, intricate cloud infrastructure here.
Oh, for sure.
So even finding the root of the outage and then fixing it, that's no easy feat.
It sounds like a frantic game of digital whack-a-mole. So while users are left in the dark, Microsoft's engineers are scrambling behind the scenes trying to get everything back online.
Pretty much.
But let's zoom in on the human side of things for a second. We know system administrators live and breathe this stuff every day. What was their experience during all this? How did they even try to make sense of what was happening?
For sysadmins, a huge outage like this is basically their worst nightmare. Suddenly, they're drowning in complaints from users who can't access the tools they need, and the pressure's on to find a solution fast.
Talk about stressful. I'm guessing the Reddit forum became their lifeline.
Absolutely. These online forums are where they can connect with each other, share what they're seeing, and basically try to make sense of the chaos together. It's actually kind of fascinating to watch them navigate it all.
Yeah.
They're troubleshooting, sharing technical stuff, but then also cracking jokes, offering each other support. It's a whole mix.
That human element, right.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got users venting on social media, sysadmins huddled in their forums, and Microsoft working like mad to fix everything. What were some of the standout comments or things you noticed in that Reddit forum?
Oh, there were definitely some gems in there. Lots of jokes and memes flying around. Someone posted RIP, another one went with Office 364.
Classic.
And then there was my personal favorite, Blame DNS is on PTO this week.
Uh-huh.
It's a good reminder that even in a full-blown tech meltdown, people find ways to laugh and connect.
It's that shared experience, right? Misery loves company, especially when it's a global tech outage we're talking about. But I imagine amidst the humor, there was a good dose of genuine frustration and confusion, too.
Definitely. A lot of users were expressing how annoyed they were with the lack of clear information, especially that gap between what Microsoft is saying and what people were actually experiencing. One comment that stuck out was, the status page is only updated if admins cannot access Service Health via the portal.
Oof, talk about adding insult to injury. But were there any bright spots in that forum? Any examples of people stepping up to help each other out?
Oh, for sure. Some folks went above and beyond to be helpful. One user, Philib, was constantly giving updates from the Microsoft Admin Center, even shared the specific incident reference number, M0941162.
Okay, that's awesome.
It's those little acts of kindness that make a difference in those tense moments.
It's like finding a beacon of hope in the middle of a digital storm.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that some users were throwing out theories about what might have caused the outage. What were some of the more interesting ones you came across?
Oh, there were some wild guesses. One user jokingly blamed their own company's Exchange Online migration for the whole global outage.
Oh, wow.
Talk about taking ownership, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good reminder that even when tech's letting us down, we can still find a way to laugh at ourselves in the situation. But let's shift gears for a sec and talk about the wider impact of this whole thing. We've touched on the immediate headache for users and sysadmins, but what about the financial side of things?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. We're not just talking about a few hours of lost productivity. An outage of this magnitude can hit businesses that rely heavily on Microsoft 365 right in the wallet. To give you an idea, a similar outage back in July 2024, it involved a CrowdStrike security issue that also messed with Microsoft services, ended up costing Fortune 500 companies a crazy amount.
Oh, really? How much are we talking?
An estimated $5.4 billion.
Wait, $5.4 billion? That's insane. How do they even calculate a cost like that?
It's a whole bunch of factors combined. You've got the obvious loss of productivity, where employees are just twiddling their thumbs, unable to get anything done.
Right.
Then there's the potential for missed deadlines, projects getting pushed back, and workflows going haywire, which can ripple through the entire company.
It's like a domino effect. One thing goes wrong and the whole system's thrown off.
Exactly. And then you add in the potential for lost revenue. If a business relies on online platforms for sales, customer support, or any other money-making activities, an outage can be a direct hit to their bottom line.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And don't forget about the potential damage to their reputation and customer trust. In today's world, news of an outage spreads like wildfire online. Customers have plenty of other options if they feel like a company can't deliver.
It's a tough landscape out there, and even a temporary blip can have long-lasting consequences for a company's image and its relationship with its customers.
Exactly. And we haven't even touched on the potential legal and regulatory headaches. Depending on what caused the outage and the industry involved, there could be fines, penalties, even lawsuits to deal with.
Wow, that really paints a picture of the potential fallout. So it's not just about the immediate disruption, it's about those long-term consequences that can ripple through a company's operations and finances. It makes you wonder if there's anything businesses can do to try and soften the blow.
Yeah.
Is there a way to prepare for the inevitable?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the good news is there are steps they can take to try and minimize the impact when these things happen. One of the most important is having a solid disaster recovery plan in place.
Okay, so like a safety net.
Exactly. This means having backups of all their important data, setting up alternative ways to communicate, and having clear procedures for getting things back up and running fast if an outage hits.
So it's like having an insurance policy for their digital infrastructure.
Right. But it's more than just the technical side. It's also about having a good communication plan to keep employees and customers in the loop during an outage and training staff to handle these kinds of incidents effectively.
So it's a holistic approach, combining the tech, the processes, and the people. It's not just about throwing money at the problem, it's about building a culture of resilience and being ready for the unexpected.
And it's a constant process because technology is always changing, threats are getting more complex.
Right.
Organizations need to be adapting and updating their strategies all the time to stay ahead of the game. But speaking of evolving technology, there's another angle to this Microsoft outage that's worth exploring.
Oh, I'm all ears. What else is there to uncover in this digital mystery?
Well, we've talked a lot about reacting to outages, how companies deal with them once they happen.
Yeah.
But what if we could use technology to be more proactive? What if we could see these outages coming before they hit and take steps to stop them altogether?
Okay, now we're talking.
That's where artificial intelligence comes in.
Now that's an interesting twist. AI is always fascinating to me, how it has the potential to change the way we work and live. How could AI actually be used to prevent outages like this?
Imagine this. Instead of relying solely on humans to spot and diagnose problems, We have AI algorithms constantly crunching massive amounts of data in real time.
Okay, I'm following.
These algorithms could analyze system logs, network traffic, even what people are saying on social media, all to identify patterns that might point to an outage about to happen.
So AI could be our early warning system, basically.
Acidically. And it goes beyond just detection. AI could be used to automate fixes too. Picture this. An AI system sees a weird spike in server traffic, predicts it's about to overload, and automatically reroutes traffic to other servers to prevent a crash.
That's some next level stuff. Is that even possible with current AI technology? Can we really trust machines to handle those crucial parts of our digital world?
We're still in the early stages, but the potential is definitely there. Companies like Microsoft are pouring money into AI-powered tools for managing IT
Oh,
operations.
interesting.
These tools are already being used to automate things like log analysis, spotting anomalies, and even predictive maintenance.
So AI isn't just about reacting to outages, it's about stopping them before they even start. That's pretty amazing. But I'm guessing there's still some hurdles to clear before we can hand over the reins entirely to our AI overlords, right?
Of course, AI isn't a magic bullet, and there are definitely things to consider. For one, we need to make sure those AI algorithms are accurate and reliable. False positives or wrong diagnoses could lead to unnecessary disruptions or even make existing problems worse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between human oversight and AI automation. We need to make sure the AI is doing its job right and that we have human experts ready to step in for those complex situations that need intuition and experience.
Right. The human touch is still essential.
Absolutely. And we also need to think about ethical stuff like data privacy and potential bias in those AI algorithms. We have to make sure these systems are designed and used responsibly with the right safeguards in place.
It's a good point. Even as we're embracing these powerful new technologies, we need to be aware of their potential impact and tread carefully. But it sounds like AI has the potential to completely change how we approach IT operations, making our systems more resilient and reliable over time.
Absolutely. And maybe someday, outages like the one we're dissecting today will be a thing of the past. Just a funny story from the early days of the internet. But until then, we'll keep learning from these experiences, adapt our strategies, and find ways to navigate the ever-changing digital landscape.
Well said. But as we wrap up this deep dive into the technical and financial side of the Microsoft outage, I want to bring it back to a more personal level. This episode has been all about the impact on businesses and those system administrators. But what about the individual user?
Oh, yeah, good point.
You, the listener, who suddenly found themselves cut off from email, messaging apps, basically their connection to the online world.
That's crucial. It's easy to get caught up in the technical details and the big picture, but we can't forget that these outages affect people's everyday lives.
Right.
They throw off our routines, how we communicate, our ability to work and connect with each other.
So let's switch gears for a bit and talk about the human side of this outage. How did this experience change your perception of technology and its role in your life?
It's like suddenly you're in the cockpit of a plane that's nosediving, and someone expects you to just take over and fly it. You're getting bombarded with alerts, users are freaking out, and you're racing against the clock to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it.
Man, I bet the pressure is intense. So where do they even start? What's the first thing a system administrator does when they're hit with a massive outage like this?
Well, the first hurdle is often just figuring out how big the problem actually is. Is it something messed up in their own systems, or is it wider than that?
Right.
Remember, in those early hours of the Microsoft outage, nobody was really sure if it was a global thing or something more contained.
So they're not just fighting the outage itself, but also that lack of information, that sense of the unknown. That must make everything even more complicated.
Absolutely. And all of this is happening while they're dealing with a flood of questions from users who are understandably getting more and more frustrated because they can't access the tools they need to do their jobs. It's a high-stakes situation that requires thinking on your feet, problem-solving skills, and a whole lot of patience.
Sounds like they need to be a firefighter, a detective, and a therapist all at the same time. But let's get into the specifics here. What are some of the actual tactics that system administrators use to tackle these outages? What does their troubleshooting process look like?
One of the first things they do is check their own systems and logs to make sure nothing's broken internally.
Okay, so start with the basics.
Exactly. This might involve looking for error messages, checking server status, making sure the network connection is solid. Once they've confirmed that the problem isn't on their end, they start looking for information from external sources.
So it's a combination of internal investigation and gathering information from the outside. Where do they go for those external sources? Are we talking about those status pages we mentioned earlier?
Status pages are definitely a key resource, but they also check news websites, social media platforms, and of course those online forums where they can tap into the collective wisdom of other system
Right,
administrators.
strength in numbers.
It becomes a race against time to put all the pieces together, get as much information as possible, and figure out what steps they need to take to minimize the impact on their users.
And all of this is happening while those frustrated users are watching, right?
Uh,
I bet communication becomes a crucial part of the job during an outage like this.
Absolutely. Keeping users in the loop and managing their expectations is essential. System administrators are walking a fine line here, trying to offer reassurance without overpromising and sharing information that's often incomplete or constantly changing.
Sounds like a tough balancing act. But let's be real, communication can only go so far when people are literally cut off from the tools they need to work. At some point, system administrators have to shift from explaining the problem to finding workarounds.
Right. You hit the nail on the head. That's when their resourcefulness and creativity really shine. They have to find ways to keep things running, even if it means cobbling together temporary solutions or relying on manual workarounds.
Wow.
This might involve setting up alternative communication channels, restoring data from backups, or even pulling out those old offline procedures that everyone thought were obsolete in the age of cloud computing.
So it's not just about fixing the immediate problem, it's about minimizing the disruption and keeping the business afloat, even if it means going back to basics for a while. It sounds like a true test of their skills and their ability to think outside the box.
It definitely is. And something that often gets overlooked is the emotional toll these outages take on system administrators. They're under immense pressure to resolve these situations quickly, and the stakes are high. What they do directly affects the productivity and sometimes even the revenue of their entire organization.
It's a good reminder that behind all of this technology, there are real people dealing with the consequences of these outages. We often focus on the technical aspects and the financial impact, but it's important not to forget about the human element.
Absolutely. And that's why stories like the one we're talking about today are so important. They give us a glimpse into the world of the people who work tirelessly to keep our digital world running smoothly, often behind the scenes, and without much recognition. But let's shift gears back to that $5.4 billion figure we mentioned earlier. You asked how they calculate a cost like that, and it's a complex question with a lot of different factors.
I'm all ears. Break it down for me. What are the different things that contribute to the massive financial impact of an outage like this?
It goes way beyond just those few hours of lost productivity. Think about it. You've got employees who are basically stuck, unable to do their work. That's lost time and lost output right there.
Right.
Then you've got the potential for missed deadlines, projects getting delayed, and workflows getting disrupted, which can have a ripple effect across the whole organization.
It's like a chain reaction where one broken link can throw the whole system out of whack.
Exactly. And then you add in the potential for lost revenue. If businesses rely on online platforms for things like sales, customer service, or anything else that brings in money, an outage can directly hit their bottom line.
Makes sense.
And we can't forget about the potential damage to their reputation and customer trust. In today's hyper-connected world, news of an outage travels fast, and customers have plenty of other options if they feel like a company isn't reliable.
It's a competitive world out there,
Yeah.
and even a temporary disruption can have lasting consequences for a company's image and its relationship with its customers.
Exactly. And we haven't even touched on the potential legal and regulatory implications. Depending on the nature of the outage and the industry, there could be fines, penalties, even lawsuits.
Wow, that's a pretty sobering picture of the potential fallout. So it's not just about the immediate inconvenience, it's about the long-term consequences that can affect a company's operations and finances for a long time. It makes you wonder if there's anything businesses can do to prepare for these kinds of things. Is there a way to be ready for when, not if, it happens?
That's a question a lot of organizations are wrestling with right now, and the good news is there are steps they can take to try and minimize the damage when these disruptions occur. One of the most important things is to have a solid disaster recovery plan in place.
Okay, so like a backup plan for when things go wrong.
Precisely. This means having copies of their critical data stored safely, alternative ways to communicate if their usual methods go down, and clear procedures for quickly restoring services when an outage hits.
So it's like having an insurance policy for their digital infrastructure. You hope you never need it, but you're sure glad you have it when things go south.
Exactly. But it's more than just the technical stuff. It's also about having a clear communication plan to keep employees and customers informed during an outage and training their staff on how to effectively respond to these incidents.
So it's a comprehensive approach, combining technology, well-defined processes, and well-trained people. It's not just about spending a bunch of money, it's about building a culture of resilience and being ready for anything.
And it's an ongoing effort because technology is always evolving and the threats are becoming more sophisticated. Organizations need to constantly adapt and update their strategies to stay ahead of the curve. But speaking of evolving technology, there's another side to this Microsoft outage that we should talk about.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What other secrets are hidden in this digital mystery?
Well, so far we've mostly talked about reacting to outages, how companies deal with them after they happen.
Right.
But what if we could use technology to be more proactive? What if we could actually anticipate these outages before they occur and prevent them?
Okay, now you've got my attention.
That's where artificial intelligence comes in.
Now that's an interesting twist. I've always been fascinated by the potential of AI to change how we work and live. How could AI actually be used to prevent outages like this?
Imagine this. Instead of relying solely on humans to spot and diagnose problems, we have AI algorithms constantly analyzing massive amounts of data in real time.
I'm listening.
These algorithms would be able to analyze system logs, network traffic, even what people are saying on social media, to identify patterns that might indicate an outage is about to happen.
So AI could basically be our early warning system for potential problems.
Exactly. And it's not just about detection. AI could also be used to automate corrective actions. Imagine an AI system that sees an unusual spike in server traffic. It predicts an overload is about to happen and automatically redirects traffic to other servers to prevent a crash.
That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
But is that really feasible with current AI technology?
Mm.
Are we at a point where we can trust machines to manage such critical aspects of our digital infrastructure?
We're still in the early stages, but the potential is there. Companies like Microsoft are investing a lot of resources into AI-powered tools for managing IT operations.
Interesting.
These tools are already being used to automate things like analyzing logs, detecting anomalies, and even predictive maintenance.
So AI isn't just about reacting to outages, it's about proactively preventing them in the first place. That's a pretty big deal. But I imagine there are still some challenges to overcome before we hand over complete control to our AI overlords.
Oh, for sure. AI is not a magic solution. There are definitely some important things to consider. For one thing, we need to make sure these AI algorithms are accurate and reliable. False positives or misdiagnoses could cause unnecessary disruptions or even make things worse.
Makes sense. We don't want to create more problems while trying to solve existing ones.
Exactly. So it's about finding the right balance between human oversight and AI automation. We need to ensure that the AI is functioning as intended and that we have human experts on hand to handle those complex situations that require human intuition and experience.
Right, we can't completely replace the human element.
Absolutely. And we need to consider the ethical implications as well, things like data privacy and the potential for bias in AI algorithms. We need to make sure that these systems are designed and implemented responsibly, with proper safeguards in place.
It's a good point. Even as we embrace these powerful new technologies, we need to be mindful of their potential impact and proceed with caution. But it sounds like AI has the potential to revolutionize the way we handle IT operations, making our systems much more resilient and reliable in the long run.
Absolutely. And maybe someday outages like the one we've been dissecting will be a distant memory, just a funny story from the early days of the internet. But until then, we'll keep learning from these experiences, adapt our strategies, and find ways to navigate this constantly changing digital world.
Well said. But as we wrap up this deep dive into the technical and financial aspects of the Microsoft outage, I want to shift gears and bring it back to a more personal level. We've talked a lot about the impact on businesses and system administrators, but what about the individual user?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You, the listener, who suddenly found themselves without email, messaging apps, their connection to the digital world.
That's an important point. It's easy to get caught up in the technical details and the big picture, but it's crucial to remember that these outages have a very real impact on people's everyday lives.
Heavily.
They disrupt our routines, how we communicate, our ability to work and stay connected.
So let's shift gears for a bit and talk about the human side of this outage. How did this experience change your perception of technology and its role in your life?
Yeah, it's amazing how something like this Microsoft outage can really make you rethink the technology we use every single day.
It really does.
You take it all for granted and then it vanishes and you're like, whoa, I depend on this way more than I realized.
It's so true. Like that saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Exactly.
And in this case, it wasn't just email or Teams that went poof. It was that feeling of, everything working, that smooth flow to the day. You don't even realize is there until it's not. And then you're suddenly faced with this big question. How do I handle this? How resilient am I when these digital things go haywire? Do I have a backup plan? Other ways to communicate, to get work done, or even just relax and chill when my usual online stuff is out of reach?
I love that you bring up resilience because it's about realizing, okay, we can't control when these massive outages happen, but we can control how we react to them.
Right.
Do we let it ruin our whole day, or do we figure it out, find ways to stay productive, keep in touch, and even find some good stuff in the middle of the mess?
Going through those Reddit forums, I did see comments that showed that kind of resourcefulness.
Yeah.
One user was like, finally have time to tackle that pile of paperwork, and another talked about using the downtime to actually chat with coworkers over coffee, in person.
Always a silver lining, right? It's all about how you look at it.
Exact.
Seeing these outages not just as a pain, but as an opportunity.
Yeah, I like that.
A chance to unplug for a bit, reconnect with yourself, with other people, maybe even rediscover some of those old school non-digital skills.
It's like a forced digital detox, right?
Exactly. A time to step off that treadmill of always being online and really think about your relationship with technology.
And maybe, in the long run, experiences like this lead to a healthier, more balanced way of using tech,
Maybe so.
where we're more aware of how much we use it, appreciate the good stuff it brings, but aren't so dependent on it for our happiness and productivity.
That would be ideal.
So wrapping up this deep dive into the Microsoft outage, the big takeaway here is even giants like Microsoft have their hiccups, and those hiccups can have a ripple effect across our lives. But within those ripples, there's also a chance to reflect, to adapt, and even rediscover some things.
It's true. It reminds us that this digital world is always changing and we have to change with it.
Absolutely.
Not just in terms of our technical skills, but also in our ability to handle the unexpected, to find balance when things get chaotic, and to develop that sense of digital self-reliance.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to our listeners, we leave you with this final thought. How will you use this experience, and others like it, to shape your own path in the digital world? It's something to think about as we continue to explore this ever-changing online landscape.